Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I wanted to talk a little bit about somebody who has been on my mind for a while, and that is the famous Watchmen character, Rorschach. Now, if you're not familiar with the Watchmen and its story, that's really not materially relevant to what I want to talk about today. So don't worry too much about that. I want to talk more about what happened with the character of Rorschach himself. Rorschach is a character who wears a Rorschach test as a mask, basically. It's covered in weird ink spots. They are ever-changing, and yet Rorschach himself is an objectivist. He is a person who believes that good and evil are clear-cut and totally pure, unmixed goals or ends. Things that exist in and of themselves, universal forces almost, like magnetism or gravity. And he represents a philosophy that has existed for a very long time, but which is most strongly articulated, I think, in the modern day by Ayn Rand. In fact, Randian objectivism is probably the first articulation of all of these different principles in a single unified theory. There were plenty of philosophies that thought things along these lines, but very few people took them and systematized them and cut out some of the things Rand cut out and contemplated the modern day in the light of, for example, Rand's experience in the Soviet Union. So there was a lot of things that are quite timeless and eternal in objectivism, and there are a lot of things that are very heavily shaped by the unique, specific experiences of Rand. And I think that many of my problems with objectivism are more born out of Rand's personal experiences and have less to do with the stronger, more philosophical elements of the system in and of itself. Although there are parts of the system which I think are just bonkers, not the least of which is the fact that it is an inherently atheistic worldview, which I've never found creditable. Even if I was not a Christian, as I am, I think I would be more of a pagan than an atheist. There's simply too much in the universe that seems structured and reasoned for me to buy into that Sagian kind of meaningless, eternal, physical world that so many atheists seem to think we exist in. And atheists, you can BTFO me down in the comments and let me know how, I'm totally wrong on that take. That's fine. That's fine. I've heard it my whole life. You're probably not going to tell me anything I haven't already. But let's get back to Rorschach. The really fascinating thing about Rorschach is that he is written by Alan Moore. Alan Moore is not an objectivist. He wrote the character of Rorschach as kind of both a tribute to and kind of a rejection of not just objectivism, but specifically objectivism as it was presented by the author Steve Ditko. Now, as far as I know, Alan Moore had no problems with Steve Ditko. He just found objectivism to be weird and quirky and a little bit off base, in much the same way I find atheism to be weird and quirky and a little bit off base. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Alan Moore wanted to present a story that showed why he didn't think objectivism, among many other things, was really working out. And so he wrote The Watchmen with Rorschach as the protagonist. He's the person we get the story through. And he tells the story to us. And he tells it in a very authentically objectivist way. And Moore achieved something very, very fascinating there. He wrote a story that stars an objectivist and is, I think, supposed to show that the hero of the story is a very relativistic person, somebody who does not believe that good or evil are absolutes that we must pursue in a pure and unadulterated sense. And Moore wrote this story with this protagonist and this hero in an attempt to kind of show some of the shortcomings of objectivism. I don't think Moore necessarily agreed with all of the viewpoints he gave to Ozymandias any more than he did Rorschach. And Ozymandias is this character who is supposed to be the hero of The Watchmen. So, Moore presents us with two characters, one of which he agrees with more than the other, but he allows us to kind of weigh their opinions and their actions for ourselves. And he presents them both fairly authentically. Now, I don't mean that Alan Moore is the greatest writer ever, or that he writes characters that I find compelling and human. He does sometimes. I haven't read a whole lot of Alan Moore. Frankly, I find his dialogue to be a little bit stilted and difficult to get invested in. And that's fine. If you enjoy Alan Moore's The Watchmen, by all means, enjoy Alan Moore's The Watchmen. People have very, very different tastes in this matter. But I have reread The Watchmen recently, and I found the experience fascinating because Alan Moore does authentically portray these characters. And while I'm not the most dyed-in-the-wool objectivist, and I'm certainly not a relativist, I can tell that Moore was trying to present these characters to us at their peaks, at their best, living out the things they believe in a world that does not necessarily agree with those things, and that will challenge them on them in a number of ways. And we see all of those challenges, and we examine them, and we come away with our own opinions. And I think Moore achieved something there that very few, especially comic authors, have achieved since. He's written a character he totally disagrees with in a way that resonates with the people who agree with that character. What I mean by that is that Rorschach is beloved by objectivists. Now, they realize that he doesn't necessarily 100% reflect their way of thought, and he is also a character who's a little bit off his rocker. But he does not misconstrue objectivism, and he doesn't behave in a way that objectivists would not behave. And this is really, really great writing on Moore's part. We know that Moore was not an objectivist in the way Steve Ditko was an objectivist. We even know he was kind of throwing shade at objectivism in the way he built Rorschach's costume. He has a Rorschach test on his mask. That is an inherently subjective thing, and yet it covers over Rorschach's face. You know, it covers over his identity. And it kind of hints at Moore's opinion that even this apparently objective and unshakable standard is still subjective. And yet, Moore took the time to understand and correctly portray this philosophy in his story. And that is part of what I think has made it such a classic and has made Rorschach, the character, resonate so strongly with the audience of people who he reflects. There is a lot of talk today about representation in media. And if we are really going to represent, then we need to represent people as they are. And I think Rorschach is a really, really great example of that to hold up and study as you attempt to tell a story about people you are trying to represent, whether they are an ethnic group or a lifestyle or a culture or a philosophy. Look first to Rorschach and consider that and ask yourself, can I do what Alan Moore did with Rorschach? If you can't, you're probably not ready to write that character yet. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. There's a like button and subscribe button down below. You can let me know what you think about Rorschach as a representative of something you disagree with in the comments below, and I will talk to you later.